Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our expert challenges. Today we're doing the tips and tricks sessions for 3ds Max and Maya, and hopefully you all recognize that this is probably the 3ds Max one, since that's what's in the schedule. We've got a number of experts here with us today. My name again, Sean Hendricks, work in the technical marketing and video production side of Autodesk. Right next to me here I have Louis Marcoux, who is one of our technical specialists, very well-known face at the trade shows and events, with very deep knowledge of how to get around in all sorts of arcane areas of 3ds Max. Right next to him we have Martin Coven, who is one of our new product designers. So again, just do a quick Google search and you'll see Martin's name on a number of things. He's got a very extensive background in pretty much every industry, it seems. You've touched a little bit of it, at least. A little bit.
Until I get run out.
Yeah, I'm done. So he's come to help with the designs of coming up versions of 3ds Max. Next to him we have our guest presenter here today. We have Jacques Choi, who is going to be is from Eidos Montreal, and he is a lead character artist at Eidos, and he's going to be sharing some of the wisdom he's learned in working in the games industry and AAA titles. So feel free to, if you want to direct a few questions directly at him specific to the type of work he does. And at the far end we have Chris Murray, who's on my team. He is the tech marketing specialist for 3ds Max, responsible for the new feature videos and things you see for Max, for instance. So he's a voice. Once you hear it, you'll probably
Stage
recognize.
demos.
Lots of stage demos, that kind of stuff. So ground rules, I guess, again, is by all means start sending in questions into the site. Just so you know, we are, because we're live streaming, we're about 40 seconds delayed to what you see. So at the point we say it and you type something, there's a 40-second gap somewhere in there. So if it feels a little disjointed sometimes, that's exactly why. I think it's because people just want to be able to censor us at odd times.
And that takes about 60 seconds for me to get it first.
Exactly. 60 seconds of Louis thinking how to answer that question. So keep that in mind. Second, this is the tips and tricks session. We will not be discussing kind of the future of the product. This is talking about where the product is today. We're also talking about, you know, is there a tool that does something, and that tool may be from 10 releases ago, who knows. The nice thing is, again, you've got between all of us people that have been using this product for decades at this point. So we've got a lot of historical knowledge on the product as well. So feel free to throw stuff like that, and we can all discuss it here. I took in a number of questions over the last few weeks through the website, so we've got some preset and ready to go. So we'll basically bounce back and forth between the questions that were already sent to us and questions that you guys have. And also I've asked everyone to kind of think up their own personal tips and tricks and things like that we can share throughout the 90 minutes. So with that, why don't we dive in? Let me just pull up my chat system here. So here's one question that just came out. And it's basically lots of new features in the last year or two seem to be related to game development and creative animation. What are the features that design visualization folks should be most excited about?
Well, there's several.
Yeah, well, we can talk about 2015, right? It's I'm allowed to.
We're talking about the new current.
So the active shade with mental ray is kind of cool. There's supported maps in iRay, which is also cool. The new Scene Explorer, Layer Manager combined together are very, very useful for all industries, but especially for design viz, I think, because you work with layers, it's already a workflow that's established. So be able to have nested
while
layer
you're talking,
organized.
I'm going to go ahead and
okay, yeah,
I'll load up a scene that has that in there.
But I think it's a big thing. The placement tool actually came from Design Viz production, and everybody loves it. It's the ability to just drag object and they will follow any surface. So I saw somebody posting that it's also called magnetic modeling. It's just following, and it's nice because if you use the shift copy and it starts to copy objects on surface, it's going to follow surface.
Right.
So that kind of stuff is very handy for populating or decorating a scene.
Yeah.
So there you're seeing in Chris's window.
I showed this yesterday during the dev session. Maybe you weren't there for that, but you were talking about the Scene Explorer, and one of the things we talked about in the Scene Explorer yesterday was, besides the ability, actually let me back up just 1 second. So the new Scene Explorer comes out, has been replaced in the Layer Manager button. So if you click the Layer Manager button, you get this dialog instead of the previous one. So it's a little more intuitive, and it does a lot of things. It's resizable, it's dockable. It's resizable after it's docked, which is a big thing. But what Louis was alluding to here is down here, it also ships with a large number of preset scene explorers that you can add to your scene that will become part of your scene. So if you're doing, if you're doing lots of lights, now I don't have a lot of lights in the scene, but if you're doing a lot of lights, you can switch over to a Light Explorer, and it gives you all of the information. It's like pre-laid out or predefined with specific columns to those workflows. So those are some of the things I think that visualization people are really going to want to know. They're not going to have to go, even though the Scene Explorer is completely configurable on their own. They're not going to have to go in and do it. Figure out how to do it. There's lots of presets. One other feature that we didn't talk about that came out 2014 or 2013 is the new perspective tool. The new really simple
perspective match.
Perspective match, right? It's over. I don't have a scene open for that right now, but the new perspective match tool here, it's over on the utilities command panel, and it gives you the ability to do basically 2 or 3 point perspective with just points. It's a lot easier than previous workflows on matching. So you get an image in the background, you can match it up, and then you can actually start working in that space.
Exactly.
To do that.
So I think
another thing that I want to mention, you mentioned 2015, is now we have a toolbar for the state sets. So in the past I used scene states a lot to do like hiding, unhiding, certain things for presentations, and now we can have a quick access to the state set. So it's very easy to just prepare a few of those state sets, hide layers, change materials, change lighting conditions, and just switch between those.
Right.
So that's kind of nice.
And actually, I want to, since you're talking about state sets, another good example of using for AEC or architectural visualization or anything. If you have different design iterations, you don't just have to use state sets for rendering. You can use it for scene management. So you can have, since it tracks visibility of objects, you can have design iteration A, B, C, or D, and just turn off the states, and you get doors, different sets of doors, different sets of windows, different sets of whatever. So using state sets in conjunction with the new Scene Explorer and turning like layers and things on and off, it gets to be a pretty powerful workflow for architectural.
And I know with the Scene Explorer thing I like is being able to have more than one Scene Explorer up and docked and working. The fact is, like, okay, I've got one that's just looking at all my objects broken out, one that's looking at lights, for instance, another one that I can deal with layers, and I'm not switching around. I can just literally line them up for the workflow I'm doing at that moment and save stuff in that scene.
Yes. And actually, one more thing, and this can...
Just one more
Sorry,
thing.
well, this
we have
you
like
just reminded
1,000
me.
more things.
I know, this is what happens when you get 5 chefs, right? It's a horrible soup, but it was a good idea. State sets also tracks the on and off mode of modifiers.
Right.
That's a little known. That came. I think it was a last year feature or something.
And
like
viewport
Yep.
viewport position and shading mode.
Yep. So combine all of those things for AEC. I think AEC people should take a really closer look at some of those workflows.
All right, let's move along. Since I think
But you designed the Scene Explorer, right?
Yeah, I was working on Scene Explorer. It's got a lot of nice things. You can, like, if you're working with layers and you have another Scene Explorer, you can drag objects from one Scene Explorer into the layers. So if you're
for
picking
quick coordination and
right, if you're doing constraints or something like that, and you have to pick an object, you can actually pick it from the Scene Explorer now. So we're trying to make it a lot more immersive in the workflow.
All right, let's go into one of the ones that was sent in to us.
One more thing. Did you notice the color? Did you notice the color? It was dark gray. So I know it's not for the designer. Well, but I kind of when I saw it was dark gray, I was like, I love it.
There we go.
And the quad menus are customizable, so you can add more to it.
See, you could just go. We could do the rest of the 90 minutes on the little
Scene
tiny
Explorer.
things that are not showing up.
Right.
Yeah.
Is that a
they're all
challenge?
very-
'Cause you
No,
need
no. All right, so let's take one of the tips that was pre-sent in. Well, one of the questions that was pre-sent in. This was sent specifically to Chris.
Oh boy.
We basically have a customer that sent in to us a file that we're using for some of our demo content. And so he actually sent in, Chris, how would I build a history-independent IK solution for this character's shoulder and hip? Seeing as you have the file, I thought it'd be rude not to ask.
Right. Okay. So yes, if you see on the new feature videos this year for the new Active Shade, Mental Rain Active Shade, we use this piece of content from a customer in the UK. His name is Adrian. Thank you, Adrian. We appreciate it. And I appreciate Adrian's assertiveness.
Yep.
Now that he's got us hooked, answer my question. I wish I had more time to fully flush out a rig, but what I've done here is I kind of worked out a little bit of a solution so that we can have a discussion. So my apologies to the other experts. It's not a completely fleshed out solution, but just so everybody knows what we're talking about. This is the rig that the model that he's provided. The question was, can I have a full IK solution for this type of joint? Which you can see now the way this is designed is this just pivots around one plane here, and then this round piece rotates.
Like a ball joint.
So it's not truly a humanoid type of joint, and the legs essentially have the same type of situation. And really, the answer, although an IK solution might be part of the answer, it's not the only answer. And it's probably a multiple solution, if there's such a thing. So again, apologize for the crudeness of the rig, and I know Paul Neal is completely going to rake me over the coals when he sees this, but either way, I had it coming. I've created just a couple of IK chains just to show the rudimentary movement of what's going on here. So we know that the elbow joint bends this way, but it doesn't bend the other way. So you can't have just one chain to handle the entire arm. You have to basically separate out the rotations into their individual planes. I created a second IK chain. The first IK chain comes from the shoulder joint. And actually, if we look at this is, again, using the new Scene Explorer, which I love. If we take a look at this, you can see I've created a chain that has a lot of point helpers in there to basically, I want to separate the geometry from the rotations. I want to keep the hierarchy pretty simple that way. So I'm going to introduce a lot of point helpers there. I've created a second IK chain from the shoulder to just the elbow, and this handles the pivot rotation of the upper arm, right? So that's handling that rotation, but it's also I'm also allowing it to rotate, kind of for the arm swinging. Now you'll see the shoulder. If I zoom in there, you'll see the shoulder object also rotating. Now, obviously, it's not the same axis or exactly the same as the character that we had earlier, but you'll notice that it's rotating. And this is not part of the IK chain, and this is kind of the trick here. So what this is set up with is these 2 point helpers are related to this solution. And what this solution is this is a look-at constraint. And so let's see, where's my constraint here? Open this up. Where's my constraint? Well, either way, what we're doing is we have a 2-point constraint.
Go to rotation.
Oh, right. There you
Down.
go. Yep. Right there. Yep.
There.
Look at it. Sorry. Open up.
Found it.
Okay. Gotcha. So what we have here is a simple look-at constraint for this object, and it's looking out at this point helper out here. It's always going to look there. If I move this, you'll see that it is always looking in that direction. But I'm also controlling its orientation with an up node. So if we see here, select the up node, instead of the world, it's this point helper that's up here. So this helper object controls the orientation of the object. Now this point helper is then linked to this object. So it's kind of a compound solution. So the IK chain is in charge of controlling the position of the upper arm, and then the rotation of this, I'm going to call it the clavicle, whatever it is, because it's not humanoid, but that's how we control that. So it's a multiple phase solution, and hopefully that will allow Adrian to
Figure something out.
figure something out.
I did on my blog a blog post called, I don't remember, maybe 3-4 years ago. It was called Animation Rigging for Visualization. And I did a robot arm from the beginning to end using these type of techniques.
Oh, great.
So just a few recorded videos. I don't know where. It's on area.autodesk.com/Louis. That's it. So if you look through the old ones, this one.
Louis got a bunch of old videos that are still entirely applicable to anything you
But
want
what
to
you're
do.
describing is
Yep.
exactly the same technique. So that's kind of cool.
All right, I'm going to open up to the next question we got in, which was, why with particle flow speed, doesn't the speed add to the animated particle flow icon? If I link the particle flow to an animated object, I expect it to be an inertial system. So basically what he's asking is, if I've got a bunch of particles on an object that's moving, why isn't he seeing the particles take on the inertia of the object that's moving? And so if it stops, why don't the particles continue? So I know, Martin, you've been kind of playing with this type of stuff before, so why don't you try and tackle
Yeah,
that?
actually, we just built a scene really quickly.
Walk around behind Jacques.
Yeah.
He's cabled.
So the problem is when you're linking it to an object, it's inheriting the movement of the object, and so it sees the parent as 0, 0, 0 world space. So what you can do, let's see, do we have it? Inherit speed. So what we've done here, and I know your hotkeys are all different.
They're mainly default.
Oh, they are?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is different, right?
Yeah, it is. Well, it's different for me. So if you look at this, what we've done is we've placed the particles on the object itself, and the object is animated. The object moves in space, and those objects are spawning other particles, and those particles will inherit the movement. So if we play it, now you see that it's inheriting it, and we can change it. So right now it's inheriting 15 or 50% with a 50% variation and no divergence. So if we want it to inherit 100%, then you see it's inheriting all the velocity of the object, and you can control it. So if you want 20% with some divergence.
And also you can delete the parent at the top if you want to, like if you just want to have the set of particles that you've emitted from the beginning.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
instead of emitting multiple particles.
Right. So it's pretty quick, pretty easy workflow. We only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 operators controlling this. So there's a way to do it.
Perfect. So I got another one here. Let's actually, because I wanted to intersperse tips, tricks, things like that through. So why don't I throw this next one to Jacques? I know you had some stuff on the kind of the modeling, sculpting side you wanted to talk about.
Oh yeah. Okay. So one of the things that
I got it.
sorry about that.
You're welcome.
Where was it? One of the things that we do just in preparation for sculpting a model in games often is to we have to make the models off into like a shared rig. So we have to kind of have a high degree of accuracy. So we tend to do a lot of the modeling, at least in our workflow on Thief. We tend to do a lot of the modeling directly in Max, and just to get prepared for our sculpting. So just as an example, one of the things that we did was, as you can kind of see, oops, there we go, is we pretty much modeled all of our subgroups pretty much in a way perfectly quadded, so that we could kind of take this, and it offers us a lot more possibility to iterate during the sculpting phase as well, and it gives us a much cleaner look for when we start baking this into our normal maps. So, oops, as you can see. All we really do from here is just kind of add some of the organic detail, like wrinkles, folds, and creases, and then from there we kind of get to bake our normal maps, and it's kind of where we're at.
Do you do all your sculpting in Mudbox or something similar?
Something similar.
Because that's a lot of detail for
Yeah.
heading. Is that typical, do you think?
Well,
or?
generally the rule of thumb that I like to employ myself is anything that anything that's actually handmade, we like to model, and anything that's actually organic, that's something that we like to take into a sculpting program. And
Makes sense?
Yep.
That's a good rule of thumb.
I was thinking about one more thing about the AE stuff.
Oh.
Because I saw you zoom in and out. In 2015, you've probably experienced that when you have a big scene and you zoom out, and then you start to pan and it just doesn't pan. So that's fixed in 2015.
That's true.
That's improved in 2015.
Yeah, it's all hardware accelerated now.
Yeah, that's why you were like this, you know? But there's
All right.
one more thing.
Cool.
There's always one more thing. All right, another question that we had submitted. When I apply an unwrap UVW modifier to a box, the opposite faces are stitched. Why is that? And also, if I apply a UVW map first and then the unwrap UVW, the faces are broken into triangles. Is there a reason for this, or is it just a bug?
Well, I played around with that last night, and so when you create a primitive in Max, it's primitive is a class of object that it's parametric in nature. The UVs are generated automatically. If I put a UVW unwrap just on that, I didn't actually see it broken into triangles because I was grabbing by face just to confirm, right? I'm like, okay, and I would pull off, and I was getting
Quads.
square. I was getting quads. The center line edge of the UV cluster, I guess you'd call it, does show up in the UV unwrap, but it's also treated as an individual quad. So I didn't actually see that. I wasn't able to reproduce that. But I think it's probably important to maybe have a general understanding of UV faces and quads versus actual geometry faces and quads, and there's not a one-to-one size correlation on that. So everything was showing up properly in the UV space, and then I added just a regular UVW map modifier, and same result. It was just giving me the set of quads in the single UV in the 0 to 1 UV space. And so I didn't actually see that, so I double-checked it. So I don't know if that person is watching and wants to elaborate on that comment a little bit, but I didn't see it there. So the only other thing that I think could possibly be causing that is if somehow they do something to the geometry before they're pulling the UVs. If they're either breaking the vertices or exploding the geometry or something. So I don't know if anybody has anything else to add to that.
Yeah. Perfect. So just another shout out there for those of you who are on the chat, and hello Artur, good to see you. He's been in every one of our chats. Great guy. If you want to check, he's got a bunch of little plugins and things that he does, and one of the things he's got which is cool to play with is iDev Cam, which actually allows you to do motion capture with an iPhone to drive cameras or objects, that kind of stuff. Check it out, it's actually quite cool.
When's the Android coming?
There you go. See, now we're doing feature requests in reverse.
That didn't take long. 20 minutes.
So a question for Jacques. Where do you use 3ds Max in your workflow, or is it only modeling or something else too?
My workflow, pretty much...
Like I think they mean as in the IDOS Montreal workflow in general.
Pretty much just the modeling part. I mean, it has a big part of like kind of preliminary modeling, like for sculpting, and then pretty much all of the work that ends up in the engine has to go through Max again to for exporting, cleaning up the scenes, doing all of our rigging and skinning, and
like I know like final character animation layer will go through there. I think the
retopologization.
Will go through there. I remember when I was there, it's like a lot of the animation will start in Motion Builder, then it moves into 3ds Max, where they'll do like the fingers and facial animation and all that kind of stuff. So think of it as, I guess, the base workhorse, and then there's all the other bits that bolt onto it as you're going through. And another question for Jacques. How do you bake your ambient occlusion maps? Or if at all, and how about the normal maps as well?
Okay, well, for the ambient occlusion, I generally like to use a skylight in the scene, just like a max skylight, and we do a mental ray render just using the render to texture.
Right.
But as for the normal maps, what we tend to do is just due to the discrepancies within the engines and the different modeling programs, we bake out a world space normal map, and from there we actually use I don't know if I can mention another program, but we use another third-party software to convert it so that it's specific for the engines.
Whichever engine you're actually.
And plane. Yeah.
Well, I thought it was.
So there you have it. So let's move into some of the other questions that were sent out. Let's see. Louis, I know we had set you up as talking a little bit about Python, because I know Python's relatively new as a standard thing inside of Max, and it would be good to get an idea of kind of what you see happening with the Python stuff. We go to Louis for this kind of thing, because he tends to be the one of us that really dabbles in scripting and that kind of stuff. So
I'm going to take the next 20 minutes to write a script from scratch. No, actually, I'm just going to give an overview of how Python works in Max. The way it works is when Max will install, it will have a Python folder in which the Python compiler or converter is installed. So a script that is Python needs to be launched from 3ds Max. So you have a command, and I'm going to show it to you in a second. It needs to be launched from 3ds Max, and it's going to launch the Python script, and then the Python script execute. The beauty of the implementation in Max is that Python is generic. It's not especially compiled for 3ds Max, which means that Python as is can be linked to, or you can link in any libraries that you want. So if you go on the internet and you go Python space and you look for something, a function to do something, you're going to find something to do it in Python. So that's what's different because MaxScript is still there and you can still work in MaxScript, but Python will give you access to all these libraries. And one of the examples that I came up with is a few weeks ago, a colleague of mine, Alex from Germany, came up with this idea. He wanted to select a bunch of objects in Max and export the name of the object, the position, the rotation, and scale as an XML file. So I was like, oh, I need to build an XML file. I need to understand the syntax. And then I said, well, Python space XML, and I found a library, and I was able to write a script that included an XML exporter. So the way that it works, and I'm using here Sublime, and I want to just mention that if you go on scriptspot.com and look for Python 3ds Max Sublime, or you just Google that and you'll find where it is. We have a little package that actually someone wrote a little package that allows you to recognize MS file directly in there, so you have all the color coding in there, and also you have a Python same thing, color. So if you look at the bottom here, it recognizes it's Python, and here it's recognizing that's Max script. So you have a single interface where you can write everything and type in this stuff. So in Max, in your Max script, all you have to do is say python.execute file and give it the name of the Python file. The Python script, if you don't give it the full path of where the Python file is, it needs to be in the scripts folder for 3ds Max. There's a script Python folder. If you put it there, it's going to execute automatically. And that's my script here. So I'm going to go line by line and tell you what it does. Is that okay? No. But no, the idea is that at the top here, you see that I import Max Plus. And Max Plus is kind of the wrapper for Python for the 3ds Max SDK. So that's through Max Plus that we have access to the Max functions. So you import Max Plus, plus I imported that library called XML E3, blah, 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 and that allows me to create an XML file. So what I do here is I just create a branch, I create an item, sub-item with the position rotation, and then at the end, I just save this as an XML, and at the end, what I get is my XML file. So I don't even have to know about how to create an XML file. I just need to create those elements and save to the XML file. So that's kind of the idea, is you open up Max scripting or scripting in 3ds Max to a whole lot more functions than we had before.
As well as opening it up to the rest of a pipeline, opening it up to using external tools, processes. I mean, that was one of the main, I think, requests from our customers, was to get Python in there so that they could interact more fully with Python scripted pipeline portions.
And Python Qt and things like that.
Exactly.
So all of that is possible with this implementation. And it's actually like a few of my friends are starting to learn Python, and we kind of exchange ideas and stuff. But it's a nice scripting language for those who never tried it.
So I see a comment from Arthur about that just says 2.7.3. I think this might be saying that the Android version is 2.7.3 of his tool. Feel free to tell us if we're wrong in that. But that's what I'm reading in that answer.
I'm ready.
He's already got it coming for you. So I see a question here. Can you see normal maps in the viewport in 2015? Which, yes, because we were just showing them on the file for
You can see normal maps for a long time.
Yeah, so I'm not sure how many versions back you might be on, but yes, for a long time now we've been able to see the normal maps in view.
Just make sure that you enable the hardware.
Yeah, you have to enable the hardware viewer.
Yeah.
I don't think it's the default setting.
Yeah, exactly. You have to set up in the material editor, set it to view through hardware, and you should be fine. Oh, Archer's saying, no, it's the Python version of Max. Okay, there we go. So he wasn't answering that around the Android piece.
Oh.
You can be disappointed again.
Dang.
Okay, continuing along. We got a question, which was, is there something like the Mental Ray sprite shader for 3ds Max? This would be super useful, read fast, for scenes with a lot of overlapping transparency on cards, example leaves. I found the card opacity shader in the production shaders, which is really fast, and I get it to cast shadows, but I can't get it to receive shadows. Do you know a solution for this? So we were good enough to actually reach out to the master of all things Mental Ray in the world of Max, which is Zap Anderson, and got him to send us a response to this just to make sure we had the best possible answer for you on this one. And so basically, For him, he said that said, if you simply use the MIA material, which in the world of Max is the Arch and Design material, you can use the built-in cutout opacity feature, which works pretty much identically to the card opacity shader you're talking about. But for opaque values, the shader will use lights and shadows, but for performance, just turn the reflections to 0, and you should get essentially the exact same interaction that you're expecting.
It's good to know.
Good to know.
Yeah, I didn't know that
Next
at
time
all.
you want to build a tree with 6 million leaves, now you know.
Arch design.
There's another feature for the Arch Design people. There you go. All right, let's talk a little bit about what else we got here that we should be covering next. This one, how do you animate cloth like the latest game cinematics? You model the cloth layers on top of each other. How do you make them fit the character? Cloth offsets always seem to show problems. How do they contour this? How do they deal with this problem? And last but not least, do you have the cloth fit the character in its T-pose, and only then do you animate it to create the final animation? Do you have to do this every time you animate a character with cloth?
Yes.
Everyone's just going, yes.
Where's the make Shrek button?
Well, but the thing about that, go ahead.
Okay, well, one of the things that I know that we did in the past was we pretty much model everything to fit the character on areas that, except for the areas that we want to have secondary motion, so very loose sleeves, scarves, or, dresses or things like that. So everything would pretty much conform, except for we would probably cut to this area, and depending on what the engine's using or what hardware you're actually using, that'll kind of determine what physics system you use. So that's pretty much how the modeling was set up, and it is modeled neutrally at that point. So if there was like a big sleeve, like a wizard sleeve, it would probably pretty much just be modeled as a giant cone, and then we'd let the physics handle it from there.
So yeah, you're not dealing with the
Yeah.
entire clothing, just that piece at the end. So to
Yeah.
speak. Yeah, and I've done the same inside of Max. What I'm doing, really quick and dirty cloth stuff, where you basically skin wrap the cloth to the model, and then you basically take some of the verts and release them from that skin wrap, so they can tend to. And you can put a flex on it if all you want to do is
Right.
get a really
Yeah.
general motion out of
Yeah.
it, or you could use a cloth sim just on those polys to try and get that reaction. I am kind of the same way. Unless I'm doing something very detailed, I tend to avoid using cloth for the entire character.
Right. And if you have a lot of overlap, if you're doing the actual simulation with like the cloth modifier, you can go through the layers and add have a sub-object selection and use a push modifier or something like that to if you do have any offset. But there are some controls in there that allow you to have a larger offset for the objects as well.
And one thing I know that was a major tip that I got from a number of people that used to do that is to make sure if you've got layers of cloth on top of each other and then, say, the geometry and arm underneath that, is to make sure the relative size of polygons in each of the layers is about the same. So if you've got extremely big polygons for the underlying geometry and then little tiny ones for the cloth on one layer and bigger ones, you're going to get more interpenetration, more problems are going to start to happen just because they're not kind of closer to a one-to-one ratio.
It's based on point to point or point to
Yeah.
edge,
Exactly.
or edge to edge. So
That's probably one of the first things to look at if you just see a lot of weird interpenetrations and things like that, is just to check the density of your meshes, that they're relatively similar.
And you're right about when you say that you have to animate in, so you start from a T-pose, but you have to give yourself a simulation from frame 0 to a certain frame where your character goes into starting position. Then you have the basic simulation or the basic starting point for your cloth. Then you animate from there.
And there's nothing that says if you know you're going to have a consistent starting point for a bunch of animations, you can set that all up and then kind of lock that for cloth as your new starting point. So you don't have to keep
Right.
resimming that
Right.
100 frames of settle and everything else.
Right.
Once it's there, you can, this is my new start point.
yeah,
There's
you
a
can
little
set
button
that
for
as a cloth state, and
Yeah.
your springs and everything will still be built correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's no inherent inertia already there at that point now. It's now
Right.
that's your new start point.
The load screen.
Let's see, what do we got next? What's come in? Anything interesting? One person was asking, but do you sculpt model the creases in the cloth? Well, this would be depending on your workflow. Again, I would assume in games you're more likely to kind of pre-sculpt for certain things.
Yeah. It depends. Like I know a common workflow that's now taking place is people will often just kind of sketch out their models using a sculpting program and just kind of get the proxy mesh going, and then they'll retopo from there, and then they'll start actually doing a lot of their heavy modeling from there.
And how does the rest of us feel about it? I know if you look at like Pixar, for instance, for their movies, they'll have morph targets and stress maps and things driving to create wrinkles that are kind of wrinkle possibilities have already been modeled so that they can very quickly in viewport see wrinkles around elbows on tight clothing, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Often they're not actually a cloth sim at all in those cases, just because they want the speed.
Yeah. Yeah. It just depends on if you need it fast or if you need it,
Right.
or if you want it to look, like real cloth.
Exactly.
So.
Typically, if it's tighter cloth, then I'm more likely to go with the idea of kind of morph targets and things like that that'll drive little wrinkles, because it's not like it's swinging in the breeze. It's just because you're
Right.
moving. But if you're going to put, the big robe on them, then probably you're just going to have to sim it.
Since we're talking about that and we're talking about cloth and morph targets,
Yes.
the in Mudbox, the different sculpt layers
Yes.
come over to Max as
Morph
morph
targets.
targets.
Oh, wow.
So it automatically adds the morpher modifier, and it automatically adds all of the sculpt layers from Mudbox into 3ds Max,
So
all
if you-
set up, ready to go.
So if you think about it, one of the cool things you can do, and I haven't done this myself, but I've seen people doing these techniques, is you can send the model to Mudbox. You can actually even also kind of preset for posing on a rig so that you can get all the different places. And in those poses, you can create kind of, here's what the wrinkle should look like at that pose.
Yep.
And then when you send it back to Max, then yes, it'll automatically generate a morph system, put those in as targets, and now you could say, let's drive that morph based on the angle of
Yep.
the elbow, and it'll just morph the wrinkles right there.
Yep.
So it is actually a very quick
It's
way.
very
That's a
clean.
good call out. Yeah,
it's very clean on that.
so you could quite literally have hundreds of little morph targets that are set up for these types of things.
Yep.
If you want to do that, you need to use the skin skin morph.
Yeah, skin morph.
Because it allows you to capture, and it will only save the delta vertices. So any vertex is not.
Yeah,
changed.
everything else that doesn't
So-
change is all
And
fine.
it's based on the angle of the bones.
We've got another question here. Don't know if we have anyone that has knowledge on this one, but we'll give it a shot. When I import a container that is full of BREP objects into a scene with different system units, the positions of the objects come in scaled correctly, but the sizes of the objects themselves do not. Is there a way around this?
Read the last half of that again. The
The positions of the objects come in scaled correctly, so in relation to each other, they're in the right place.
But each object
the
is-
objects themselves are at a different scale.
that sounds like a reset transform issue.
That's what it sounds like, yeah.
Either that, or I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with importing preps, but if it's kind of like FBX, there's options where you can set the scale differently. So I wonder if they're setting a scale when they're importing. I'm not sure if I'm not familiar
Yeah, and the
with
scale's
importing
affecting the
them.
units of the objects, but it's
Yeah.
not affecting the world positions of them, maybe.
Is there a dialogue on import from that? I haven't really
don't know.
worked with that file format. but-
Unfortunately, in this crew, we've got mostly entertainment-focused people, so BREPs are a little less
Where,
used by us.
I'm not familiar with that format. Where is it originating? Where
So
does
that
it-
you'll
Could be
get
from
BREPs
different,
from like in basically solids models and stuff like
oh,
that.
okay. I bet you on export there's probably a global scale setting. I've seen this before where stuff will come in the right spot, just the wrong scale, and it's usually like a factor of 0.1 versus 1,
Right.
something like that. So on the export, check on your export. There's probably a global scale setting, and that's where it's happening.
Usually when I see anything like that, it's usually a metric to inches conversion issue.
That's another possibility.
Yeah.
too.
All right.
Usually personally, if I get import problem and scale, I just go in, and that's mentioned in the question, is I change the units, and then I save back when the units are, if I go into the customize and I go into the systems unit, that's where I define is it inch or centimeters until I get it right. And when it's in max, then I'm going to resave it with the proper units that I like. So, and it happened to me many times, but I don't know if it's related to that.
All right, let's see. What is our next one? Let's throw out this question here. This is one we came up with a few that we thought would just be useful to general people out there. So I throw this to the whole group of you. What have you seen as the most common mistake beginners make, and how should they get around it? What are the things that you guys see? Like Jacques, when you see new people coming into the company, what are the things you see? People that haven't worked in like a AAA studio before, and they're like,
I think one common thing would be just going way too dense. Going way too dense with modeling just makes the iteration process a little too difficult, and it makes the kind of the model a lot harder to work with. So I'd say just start simple.
going a little too crazy
Yeah.
too soon.
It's easier to add detail than it is to
Yeah.
remove it.
Yeah.
Martin, what have you seen kind of in the past?
Well, I would say when people scale objects or non-uniform scale objects instead of scaling or non-uniform scaling a sub-object in sub-object mode to keep the transform clean. So then when you start connecting things, parenting things, then you get these really weird
Things start
offsets and
skewing
changes and skewing. Yeah. So
That might be actually worth. That's easy to show.
Go for it.
Let me just jump in there. Oh, you're wired. Let me jump around.
We're all doing the
and I'm not even.
headphone
I'm not
dance
even
here.
gonna. I don't even really have to create anything. I'm just gonna. What Martin's talking about, for those of you that may or may not know, it's the max data flow. Move, rotate, and scale are considered transforms, which means move, right? But if you're modeling, the object's not moving. If you go up here and choose scale, that's the max in the world of data flow is thinking about moving vertices, not just scaling vertices. So if you export the model or whatever, transforms that aren't keyframed are lost, essentially. I'm generalizing
Right.
here. So in the modifier drop-down menu, there's a modifier called X4 modifier, and this is actually how you change the position, the scale position of vertices on the model in the world of geometry, not in the world of animated pipelines. So
Right.
that's what he's talking about. And
Basically carrying the data in a different spot.
Yeah.
And of course, in a lot of workflows, someone mentioned here, reset X form will often help you to get
yes,
stuff out of that.
that's a way to clean it.
But there are
Clean it back
times
up.
I've found where something very unusual has happened because you've done a lot of that work where sometimes reset X form helps, but it doesn't necessarily always fully solve the problem.
Yeah,
So it's
and-
good to be thinking about it ahead of time.
Yeah, and if you go to the utilities command panel, reset Xform is right there, and you reset selected, and essentially what it does is it adds the Xform modifier and essentially corrects that.
Right.
Yeah,
And
and
then
then just
you can
collapse
toss it
it back down.
Can I add something too?
You certainly can. Let's pull it over to Louis' screen.
There's a tool that I use so much that I put it on my Z key. It's called
Where's the Z key?
it's in Tools. I don't even remember what it is. It's it's in Edit. Sorry, Edit, and it's this thing here called the Transform Toolbox.
Oh, yeah.
So for me, I use it so often that I put it on my Z key. And the Reset X form is here. It's this little R button. But what it allows you to do, let's say I'm going to create a teapot. Let's go with the teapot. So if I want to, you see the pivot in there? So I can say I want to have the pivot at the center of the object, but at the minimum in Z, or I want that to be, let's say that my object is somewhere here, but I want the pivot to be at the origin of the world. I'll say origin. It's going to bring the pivot there. Or I can quickly say put it at the center, then put it at the base and minimum in Z, and then center that object to the world. So now it's at 0, 0, 0, and I can say reset transform, and now everything is reset to 0, 0. Scale is reset. The X form is added and then removed, so it's collapsed to
done what
editable
you would do
poly.
normally.
So
Oh, nice.
it's and what I like about this tool is that if you want to rotate this, no matter how you look at it, it's going to rotate it in the perspective. If I look at it from this direction, it's going to rotate it here. So it's very quick to just go and say, I'll turn it around of 90 degrees and move stuff around. So that tool is so useful.
So you link that next to the placement tools, and there's your...
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
So I just got a response from Jeff, who is the one that was talking about the BREP scale issue.
Oh, yeah?
And he says, found a solution to the problem in system units, uncheck respect system units in files.
There we go.
There we go.
Yeah, good point.
So we were down the right path. He just had to find the right little
There you go.
switch to click.
I would like to add one more thing to the
Sure.
what do common mistakes kind of thing. Not working at 0 when they start, or just not really paying attention to where they are in the world. That can end up. The sooner you assimilate yourself to the 3D workspace, and whether it's Maya is Y up or Max is Z up, that is actually less important than just understanding where you are. And working at 0, I think, is probably pretty important. And
Yeah, and this is something that'll come up a lot, especially in the design viz workflows where
Right.
things are geolocated
Right.
in, say, AutoCAD or Revit,
Right.
and they come in Max and it's, well, that's sitting 14 million units
Yep.
to the left.
Yeah.
And it happens with pretty much all the 3D packages, is the further from 0 you get, the wilder your accuracy can
Right.
start to get. So often it does come down to, once you're into the visualization space, you have to recenter yourself and kind of bring it back to 0.
Right. And I do have one more that I just thought of while you were doing that. This is one I see all the time, and this applies to all industries, games, AEC, film, whatever. If you're new and you're creating cameras, that the camera is an actual, it's an object. Well, I created it, and now since it's an object, I'm not paying attention to where it is. All right, let me back it up a little bit. I find that people who are new to 3D or new to Max specifically, this is kind of a Max thing. You need to pay attention to the camera, right? The defaults, like they create a camera and then they just start going. They start animating to that camera. They just start laying out their scenes, lighting, everything to that camera. And the default settings for Max cameras is not really an appropriate lens for anything. Because they have no way, since it's an object, it's like a virtual camera, the programmers have no way to know what kind of lens you're going to want.
Right.
So this is kind of the under thought of thing when they add it to the scene. If you do nothing else, at least come in and choose a 50 millimeter camera. Right? Just make a decision about your lens. I don't know. That's what on reels and things like that, I can tell immediately. They may have a great modeling reel. They may have some nice stuff, but everything's at 45 degrees. And I'm like, they haven't touched the camera.
Yeah.
So touch the camera.
All right. So other questions that have come in here.
Or box 1, box 2, box 3, box 5.
Right?
Just name them all box 1.
Yeah.
Box 1, box 1, box 1.
So I'm not sure I understand this question from Jerry. Question for anyone: in final products, do you often find mistakes? What mistakes do you see the most, if any? So are you talking about when we see like a final production from someone,
Like final models?
like show
or-
reels, or I'm not sure what he's calling on. I'm going to assume he's probably talking about like when you get a reel from someone or something, or the common things that you go, oh, that's just. And so one of them right there
Yeah.
you gave was seeing that there was no real thought to the camera itself.
Yeah.
And people, and I know even taking that a little further, if you look at in the design viz world, there's definitely a curve between the people who have just started doing visualization, the ones that do it kind of for a living for a long time. And one of the first things I see as a differential is how they use cameras.
Yeah.
Whereas one, the camera is very literally almost feels like looking out of someone's eyes. Whereas once you get to a more advanced one, it becomes cinematic. You have these cameras doing
Right.
these very slow moves at very different depth of field and all that kind of stuff. So cameras is definitely one
Right.
thing I always.
Yeah, if you want to
agree.
become well, not instantly better, but if you want to become a better camera operator in a 3D program, go make a panoramic photograph.
Yep.
That'll pretty much cover every skill you're going to need. go try and make a 360 pano, and that'll cover it. But in terms of finding other final products, I'm assuming, because final product in our software, it's always perfect.
Yeah.
I like Martin Scorsese's way to look at cameras. If he's watching, he can comment on this if he wants. But what he says is that you have to watch a movie for the first time without the sound, and you have to look at the camera and see. And you write down what you think that the camera is doing. What is it trying to say? And then you take a note, and after that you look at it with the sound, and you see if the camera did convey the feeling that. So you do that with multiple movies, and you learn a lot from cameras and because when we watch a movie, we don't necessarily pay attention to the camera. The camera emote you or whatever, but if you pay attention to it without the sound, you learn a lot from it.
Makes you pay attention to
Yeah.
that. What
So
it's
if
impacting.
Martin, if you're listening, please comment on this. And
Yes. I'm
Not
sure,
you.
I'm sure he's out there.
Not
watching.
me.
yeah,
I was going to comment right here.
So I got a question here. A question about the enhanced menus. When I dock a menu, the text becomes blurred. Is there a way around this?
blurred. I know why. It's probably because of progressive glasses. If you dock it at the top, it's not the same strength for your glasses. I don't know. Blur, I don't know.
I haven't
I have
seen
no
that.
idea.
I have not seen that either.
I've not seen that. But that's something we should. I don't
That
know.
might be a graphics card issue or something. I don't
Could
know.
be. Yeah, I
Haven't
haven't
seen
run
that.
into that particular issue myself.
Actually, there might be. We ran into this when we were at the boot camp at Gary's house. Remember, we were talking about the difference in extra screen real estate, and it came down to using large
Well,
or
I had
small
one point
fonts.
where the menus I accidentally moved them at the bottom
Yeah.
at the complete bottom of the screen, and they were semi-transparent and blurred. But that's the only problems that I
okay.
had with it. But that was human error. So, but I've never seen that blur thing.
No.
Maybe send us a screenshot.
Yeah, I don't think they can do that in the chat.
I know.
He's asking. Let's see. So he's asking, can you just try it there just to show me?
What is it? What is he doing?
He's just doing a tear off. So
Tear
we
off?
Oh,
Yeah.
he's in default enhanced.
So
on
I'm
Louis'
using the
machine.
Tear
default
off the
menus.
menu.
Yeah.
The terrible menu.
He's talking about the enhanced menus though.
Yeah, that's the enhanced menu. I
Yeah.
always use the enhanced one. So
So we're seeing them.
And then
nice
tear some out of the thing, and
Okay, like this one, like for this one, for example, like this.
yeah.
I usually like
Yeah.
I showed that a bit before. Is I tend to do a lot of demos that involve going from Max 2010. So I've got my menu here, and what I do is that if you want to see 2014, I'll just dock out 2014, and I'll say, okay, I want to talk about 2015, and I'll say, well, I want to talk about 2014 before 2015. So I'm just docking this out like this, and that's going to be my agenda for the presentation.
Is it blurry?
No blur.
Yeah, I don't see any blur.
Looks fine here. So he means a single menu. Well, I think that's what we're seeing right
Wow.
there is single menus. So
Single menu like this.
yep, looks sharp here.
But that's something we should, investigate. I
Yeah,
guess.
obviously, if you're seeing it, you should definitely see if we can figure out a way to recreate it.
I'm wondering if there's like anything to do with a second monitor being used, or
Or maybe
if
a
there's any-
resolution?
Yeah.
Yeah, there might be some weird mixture of like a video card driver versus
Yeah.
resolution or something like that. All right, moving along. Louis, I think you mentioned some sort of tip and trick around Lego blocks or something like that
Yeah.
we could do.
I had to do something like this a few weeks ago.
Let's throw one of those out there.
Okay, I was asked how would you do Lego block setup with particle flow, and actually the answer is very simple. So it's a short tip. What I'll show you, I'll go one step further, and I'll show you how to set up a Lego block, but I'll show you how to animate it, which is something that's not that trivial, but you'll see how it's done. First of all, there's a nice primitive that if you go on jokermartini.com, there's a bunch of very useful scripts there, but there's one that's free, and it's called Lego Primitive or something like that. And what it allows you to do is just go here and create a Lego, and then after that, if you're into Lego, you say I want a 2x2, and that's going to be something that's square, and that's could be very useful for a particle to create a model. So what I'll do, I'll just open a file that I did have a monster here. So it's from the Gwen and Dave movie.
It's Dave.
Yep, exactly. I don't know. I was not sure which one it was from the two, so I didn't want to say. So good.
It's Gwen. Oh my
nice
God.
to meet you, Dave. So I want to transform this, any mesh. I want to transform it into a Lego block setup.
Right.
So what I do is I go into particle flow first. I press the 6 key, or I just go into graph editor, and probably because of my projector here, I'm not able to have that key. But anyway, so we have the mesh, we have particle flow, and this is the new particle flow using the same environment, not the same environment, the same UI as a Slate. So that's why it looks similar. So I would start with an empty flow. An empty flow allows me to define how much particles I want to see in the scene. So I'll say I want to integrate step on half frame so that at frame 0 it looks right. And I'll say I want to see 100% of my particles at least for the first setup. Then after that, I'm going to use a birth grid, which is your best friend if you want to do that type of setup. The birth grid creates a grid of particles. And right now I'm only seeing ticks. I'm going to switch to geometry so that we see the geometry. And now it creates a grid of particles, and it's a very equal grid, so that I can use that to create my Lego blocks. So I'm going to go back here to my primitive. I'm going to create a Lego primitive, and I'm going to make it 2x2, 2x2, enter, and that's going to be the particle or the base for the particles. So if I want to use that, I need to use the shape instance operator, and I can grab that Lego block as being my shape here. I don't necessarily need the mapping in the material. I'm going to do that later. So that shape instance is now a Lego block. I can define the scale for it until it looks right to me. So let's say that maybe a bit bigger. So it's going to look right for the Lego size. Once this is done, I need to spread them correctly, and that's done through the birth grid. And what I tend to do is just to kind of space them out until they are all separate. And then after that, I go into the non-uniform grid, and I just reduce the space so that they kind of like stick to each other. So it's non-uniform like this, especially when the particle is not perfectly square and doesn't have exactly the same dimension. So now what I've got is a setup. I know it's tight. It's not watertight, but it all fits properly.
If it looks
exactly.
right, it is right.
Exactly. So if I zoom out, I want that to take the shape of the character. So what I would do is, again, in the birth grid, I would increase the size of the grid itself. And there's a nice tool in here called Restrict by Mesh Volume. You can delete the internal particles. You can keep one layer of particles or two. So if you have something that's hollow, Is that a word? Yeah. So hollow, you can define how many layers you want, but since it's only visible from the outside, I'm going to say 1 layer, and I'll pick this as my generating geometry. So now you see that the mesh is restricted here, so we have already our Lego blocks. So if I just make it so that it covers the whole geometry, and I can extend as much as I need, just update this mesh, and now we have the full object being Lego blocks. If I just going to turn off this here, and I'm just going to isolate unselected, and this is my model. The thing is that it's all gray, so I want to match the material that's from the object. So what I can do, very simply, I'm just going to end my isolation here. I'm going to grab the material editor, grab the material that's on this thing, and that's the material here. So there's a material static operator that allows me to assign material. So I'm going to grab this and say I want to use that material as an instance. If ever I change it, it's going to be the same. But now the UV mapping is not correct, so the particles will all have their own UV mapping. So what I can do is I can use the mapping object, and the mapping object, I'm going to grab that geometry as being the UV generator. I'll say uniform color per particle, so each block or each Lego block will have only one color. So now if you hide this, what you have is just going to grab this guy here and just say isolate unselected. You see that the mesh, and the more precise your Lego blocks are, the more precise your texture is going to be, but at least it looks the same. But the thing is that, let's say that your geometry, I'm just going to end isolate, and that's, let's say that your geometry is animated. I'm going to just create a bend animation here, auto key, just go somewhere like this, and just bend in one direction. And that's one of the best animation you've seen in your life, I'm sure.
Amazing.
So
Awesome.
You've got this, but you see that even if I go to the birth grid and I turn on, I'm going to turn off the auto key here, and even if I turn on interactive update, you'll see that it doesn't update the Lego blocks themselves. And what I'd like to do is an effect where it feels like the Lego blocks have been replaced or repositioned to create the position and the position and the position. I don't want the Lego blocks to bend in one direction or the other. So to do that, you would need to do manually, set the emit time, because that's what's happening now. Is it samples the geometry at frame 0, and then so what you would need to do is go and say emit from frame 1, and then calculate mesh volume. Emit from frame 1, and what you need to do is do it a few times. Look at the at the script listener, and what you have to do is just take a look at the script that where did I put this? So I'm going to go to my projects here, and I wrote a script that just took the 2 commands, and what I'm doing is just I changed the emit time in the script here, so that thing here, birth grid. I'm just grabbing this. I say change the emit time to the current frame, and then I change and I say calculate mesh. So that script is in my quad menus. So if I turn this off, and I say isolate unselected, and then I say play animation grid, you'll see that it's going to create that Lego block kind of effect. So it's just resampling at every frame. So that's the idea.
And so to go along with that, Arthur sent in a little text saying, I know a script that does that automatically. Cough, cough, cough. I think he's made a script that'll do that as well.
Perfect. Awesome.
And he's actually just put his website up on the chat there where you can find that as well. So now you can see under the hood exactly how to do that with our native tools. So if you want to do something more unusual or complex, you can. And if you want the quick and dirty way to get to it without having to do any of the stuff under the hood, then there is a plugin at youcandoiteffects.com.
Perfect.
There we go. All righty. Let's just see. Do we have any other interesting ones? There's one here, and again, this may be a little out of the realm of our normal knowledge in this group. Best way to lay down accurate lane striping based on laser scan survey data. Not even sure where to begin on that one myself. If that tweaks to anyone. So we're basically talking like civil work, like doing visualization
Lane
for roads.
striping.
I think that's like for road.
Based on laser scan data.
Yeah, I'm not really. I
Well,
think that might be out of our expertise area.
Yeah.
If I had to do it, I would probably start by just recreating a topology that the geometry follows first, and I will make sure that it was all quads, and that the quads would follow the direction of the road. Then after that, go into UV unwrap and grab one of the edges and do unfold from map or something like that. There's one button there that allows you to unfold from that line. I would say that would be how I would start it, but then after that,
It all depends.
It all
Yeah.
depends.
Not sure what data the laser scan data comes in as.
Exactly.
Is that point cloud or is that?
It'll
Point
usually,
cloud, yeah.
Depends on whether it's been pre-processed, I guess, before they get it. whether
It might
came in
just be
as-
points.
It might just be points.
Because they might just filter out deltas of points, and then they use it as point modeling reference, but not point cloud like you think.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's continue along here. Question for everyone. What's the most challenging portion of modeling a new character for you? Let's start with Jacques, who's got an obvious expertise in this area.
Oh boy. Reference. Just making sure you know exactly what you're modeling. Just knowing it from all angles, knowing, like, winging it in the modeling program isn't always the best thing to do. Like, it's probably ill-advised, and you never end up with the result that you're looking for. So I'd say reference.
Anyone else?
Finding a modeler.
Finding someone else to do it for me. Yes.
For me, it's proportions, but
It's
typical.
concept for me, I think.
Yeah.
That's the hardest part.
Just getting
for
that
me.
concept down.
Yep.
Yeah, assuming you have the reference done and you know what you're going to model and all that other stuff. I don't know. For me, I like to try a couple of different methods quickly to see, like, maybe I'll try spline modeling, or maybe I'll do box modeling. I mean, I know my ultimate destination is going to be quads, so I want to pick a workflow that's going to go that way. But I'm open to interpretation in terms of how I start that. Like, maybe I'll start a vehicle with splines, or I'll start it with quads. So sometimes, for me personally, I can get a little distracted, and I have to know when a method is not going to work.
Right.
Is making that cutoff, because you begin to get invested in the time. It's like, oh, I just need 1 more hour, and 1 more hour turns into your weekend is gone. And, so don't get married to your work.
Yeah.
Be ready to throw away your stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, and I know for me, because I don't do a lot of modeling, especially the last few years. I don't get much time to sit down at the tool and model. For me, it was always, I would get fairly deep into the model and have to go back and rethink, wait a minute, I have to make sure the edge flow works for animating this model. Because there's modeling how you would model if all it had to be was a still model, and then there's modeling when you know that there's animators are going to bitch at you when they try and do something with it.
Yeah, it's got to be clean.
It's got to be clean. It's got to have the geometry where they need it to bend.
It's also, I think there's a lot of these hard surface shapes that are quite difficult to kind of make without having a lot of artifacts. I know that there's on Polycount forum, there's like a weekly challenge, a hard surface modeling challenge, where they do things like model a screw inside of this other shape with with lathe, so it's like a sphere inside of like with a square coming out of it, or vice versa. And so there's different ways to think about it, but it requires a lot of foresight usually, like a lot of technical foresight, I should say.
Yeah.
You have to know
predict what's going to go wrong. Comes with experience, just
Yeah.
lots of experience. Oh, we got a question here from Arter. Still regarding character modeling, how does Jacques set up the blueprints references in the scene, or no need for it at all? Just have it in a second screen and look as you go.
Orthographics. I would just honestly put it onto a box, invert the normals, and then freeze it. That's it.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Simple enough.
To that end, here's a little tip. I don't know if people realize this. You can just open up a Windows Explorer, and as long as you're in shaded mode or realistic mode in Max, you can drag an image. You don't even have to load the material editor. You can drag an image right from the Windows Explorer onto a piece of geometry without having to do anything else.
Voila. And another question here from Logan. What are your favorite modeling methods?
Whatever works.
Is there a go-to, like, this is always the one route I start with first?
Well, I'm a quad modeler. I always start with usually a box or whatever. I used to be really militant about not having any triangles, and I actually wanted to ask you that. I thought maybe our viewers would benefit from that. With your character setup, you have a lot of quads, but what are the rules on triangles in your world?
I guess if you're going to take it into a sculpting program, you need to keep it in quads generally, but for game engines, everything breaks down to triangles anyway, so go nuts with them.
Right. Yeah, right.
The Skinners might hate you, but...
Yes, I'm sure they
Right,
will.
right.
Everyone down the pipe may hate you,
Yeah.
but you have a good day.
Usually what I do is I'll rough out a pretty rough mesh of just quads, bring that into Mudbox and sculpt it, start sculpting it, and then probably go up like 1 or 2 levels. So you're still a low res, but you're working with it, and you're still clean, and then I'll import that back into Max, and then use that as my base, and then start detailing it out.
Mudbox's retopo tool is really good, though.
Yeah.
Like if you,
It'll
let's say
clean it up.
you do have a lot of time invested in a model that is workable, and maybe you could take it into Mudbox and retopo it and get quads out of it, because you have curve control in Mudbox where you can control edge loops and where edge breaks are and that sort of thing. So
There you go. And we've got someone who's asked about open subdiv in 3ds Max, and as I mentioned at the beginning of the thing, we're not talking about future possibilities or anything like that, so unfortunately we can't tell you anything about the possibilities of open subdiv in 3ds Max. Is the question here, is it okay to have triangles for hard surfaces? And it's a general rule. Again, I think the reality is don't do triangles if you're going to have lots of deforming, and don't do triangles if you ultimately want to send it to something like Mudbox to do sculpting, because they won't like the triangles either.
For hard surfaces, I find that it's usually okay if it doesn't leave an artifact.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I mean, you can just run a
Exactly.
turbo smooth on it, see if it actually creates anything. But
I was talking with Craig about triangles, though, just the other day, and it's not that Mudbox can't handle triangles. It's just you don't want to have an inordinate amount of triangles.
Yes.
Because I was
Especially in
I was
important
doing
spots.
I was doing a terrain. I was working on some terrain in Mudbox where I wanted to get some nice cliff and rock exposures, and I had some junctions where, like, a gully came together with another rock formation, and there were triangles in them. And that really, since it's a non-animated object, it doesn't really matter. And as long as the UV maps are good, you do get some leeway.
Yeah.
So I don't, I think people get scared. Oh, it's a triangle.
Yeah, like most people that I've seen, especially if they're doing character work, the big goal is you're always going to end up with a few. There's a good chance.
Yeah.
So you try and push them to places that are less deforming, that are more hidden. It's
I
like-
think the problem is actually less with the triangle and more that the triangle usually leads to a 5-point star.
Yeah,
And the
when you
5-point
subdivide it,
stars,
yep.
starts to become this.
you get these pinches
Yeah.
and little knots. All right, let's jump on to, let's give Martin his chance at showing a tip and trick here.
Okay.
We had a few questions, people talking about the whole idea of soft bodies and stuff like that. So Martin's going to take us through a soft body workflow using particle flow.
Yeah, I'm just going to show a scene, a basic scene. And this is, I actually used this setup. I can't show the characters that I used it on, so this was my initial trying to set up and see if it worked kind of thing. And it actually uses a lot of the similar things that Louis was just using for the Lego, using the birth grid to place the particles. So if we go through, let me open up a Scene Explorer. So we hide that. You see, I just have a lot of particles. Let's see. And it's a pretty simple setup. So the particles are laid out based on a mesh. The mesh is also doing what Louis was doing, where it was just cutting it. Let's see, where is it? Birth grid? Yeah, so flesh cutter, which is a mesh that I have here. It's a box.
So that just defines what area of the model will get these parts.
Right. So if you look at it, it's got an inside and outside. And let's isolate it. So it's got an inside and outside. And the reason I did that was so that because I wanted certain areas to be heavier, to have more movement than other areas. So if you think about a fat suit, you think about your torso, you do have muscles and stuff underneath that fat, and you get more fat in different areas. So you're going to get more flexing.
I wish.
Pretty uniform. So
Blade of grass.
So I'll just unhide this and, I'll just end isolation. Okay, so what I've done is I've used those particles, and I'm actually using the green mesh as a collision shape, and what that does is it allows the particles to adhere to it, to attach to it, and then I'm able to just simply bake these particles and get some really nice movement. So
cool.
So fat suit, flesh simulation in Max.
Voila. So we've already pushed upon Martin to now create a little tutorial for that and stick that up somewhere.
Yeah, I'll clean it up and make some videos.
Because that's, again, when you look at the P-flow diagram for that, it's a very simple solution ultimately,
Oh yeah.
but it creates some very complicated looking effects.
Particle flow is your friend.
Yeah.
I love particle flow.
Very cool.
And it's fast. I mean, that simulation takes just, like less than a minute. Well, it was only 100 frames, but still,
Yeah, still.
it's not bad.
Considering what you'd go through in trying to do it another way.
Right.
So we had another question going back to triangles here. Just so tris do not affect reflections. I mean, do you get smoother reflections with quads? I would say that's a
It
yes
depends on
or
the
no.
artifacting.
Depending. Yeah.
If you do get artifacting, it could affect your reflections.
Yeah.
If it's affecting your normals.
Again,
If
I
it's a
think it
flat
would.
surface, it shouldn't
Yeah,
matter.
if it's a flat surface, it'd be fine. But if you're going to have it happen, it's probably going to be in the case you say where you suddenly get that 5-pointed poly because you put a mesh smooth or turbo smooth on top of a tri. That might create a little
Yeah.
knot where you'll get some twisting of the reflections.
Yeah, if your quad is not coplanar, that's yeah.
Okay, continuing along, we have another 20 minutes left, so we've got keep the questions coming, people. Let's see.
I'm curious about Arthur. The way that he does his Lego block, is it based on particles or it's this plugin that does everything?
I don't know.
Maybe he could comment on that. Could be nice.
Archer, please feel free to tell us what's under the hood in your plugin for the Lego stuff. We'd love to know. Here's a question. What's something that people usually waste too much time on and that people should spend less time on? It's a very wide open question.
Facebook.
Facebook it is.
I was going to say, do we have to come clean on things here?
That's a good question.
Lighting. And
Yeah.
actually lighting that doesn't matter,
Right.
right? I mean, I know I need to light the scene, but a lot of times I'll just want to throw some lights in, and then I'm like, oh, wait, if I do this, how does this surface look? And I spending time on lighting that doesn't matter.
Yeah, I would say I agree with you. I think that I spend a lot of time doing quick renders, testing, changing your shaders and changing your lighting, and just lots and lots of tweaking. And that's why I'm so excited about the new Active Shade with Mental Ray in 2015. Because I mean, I can just
Speed
let
that
it
up.
run, and I can just move things and change things, and it updates, and then I get what I want a lot faster. Yeah.
I think baking is another one. Like, I mean, baking out a 4096 texture, like a complete map, right, would be a lot more time consuming. Give it a couple test runs in like a 128 just to make sure
Yeah.
that it's not.
When you find
you
out
have
everything
you
turns
have
out
no
black because of
artifacts.
something.
Yeah,
or
your
yeah.
shadows
That's a
are
good
on
point.
by accident or whatever. So just give small test runs and then.
Yeah, which you could say that same thing straight to rendering in general.
Yeah.
It's like you do not have to render to even half of your actual final
Yeah.
res for all your tests. Like just crank it way down for the first little while just to at least make sure that your light is overall correct. I would say, from what I've seen as well, people tend to waste an awful lot of time in general, I think, just tweaking positions and all sorts of it. You watch people. I've watched a lot of people work where they just spend a lot of time, like I almost think like you mesmerize yourself.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like,
It's like the Gary Davis wiggle on the.
Yeah,
It's like he just wiggles stuff around and looks at it. It's not really doing anything.
yeah, you're not really doing anything, just kind of impressing yourself with what you've done for the last little while.
Actually, I have another good one. Unwrap something before you duplicate it.
There you go.
Simple thing no one ever.
Before you make 6,000 of these things,
Yeah.
make sure there's mapping coordinates. All right, let's see. So Archer replied back, brute force ray casting only. Oh, no, that's not where he's saying it. Let me. Just boxes. Okay, so he just wrote in something here. Brute force ray casting only works for box geometry. End result can be just boxes, individual voxels, or a list of points feeding a mass effects particle system. So he's doing some sort of brute force ray casting.
Okay.
We keep getting people asking, when will we have open subdiv in Max? I'm going to say it again. We can't tell you.
I would refer to the previous one with Kelsey and
Yep.
Eddie and see
Yeah,
if you
go watch the video from
Yeah,
yesterday.
watch that.
Is there a quick and dirty way to make clouds that won't kill render times? Oh, I can nail this one right off the top.
Go, Sean.
Okay, so yes, there is a quick and dirty is kind of a loose term you'd use here. If you go, There's a couple places you can find this. If you go onto the area, and if you look back for a demo that we did at SIGGRAPH, I think it was 2000 and...
It was in Vancouver.
which would have been 2000 and... No, 2012, 2011? 12, I think.
Yeah.
It's 2012. So you go back to our SIGGRAPH 2012, we have the videos of all of our guest presentations, and Damien Nanau from Plattige Image got up on stage and he did a whole thing on his video Paths of Hate, and he showed how he created all the clouds for this beautiful piece that he did. And I've recreated it a few times to get more realistic or more painterly effects, but ultimately you end up with near photoreal clouds actually in your viewport that you can sculpt and move around and try out.
Scanline rendering.
And do it right in the scanliner if you want. And
Yep.
I was getting render times on like 1K renders of seconds. Like zzz, zzz, and being able to go, yeah, let's just twist that a little bit and make it go up like this. And now I can get it. So it looks really good, and you can actually nail a really nice model of it. I also created a newer version of that just as a tip and trick video. Right now, it's only available if you go to Autodesk University and go to the classes from 2013, look up my name, and there's actually videos from my class that was Autodesk University, and one of the tips and tricks I give is redoing that effect. So you can definitely check that out.
And if you don't know what Autodesk University is, I highly recommend that you
Yes.
come check it out this year.
Exactly. For those of you who didn't go to Autodesk University this last year, we had an event called CAVE.
Yes.
Which was for kind of the entertainment, kind of artist, creative community. And pretty much everyone came away from that event. I had a number of people actually say, if you tell me you're doing this again next year, I will skip SIGGRAPH, I will skip NAB, I will just go to this. We had just a ton of really awesome creative speakers. Pretty much everyone I talked to came with like, I left these classes just having to go and do art.
Yes.
It's like I needed to go and
Create.
after these sessions. So well worth checking out. We'll probably start having more information on that in the next couple of months as we start to look at speakers and stuff. Okay, let's see. What else do we got going on in here? How do you render a wireframe view of your model for your portfolio in Max? So there's a few ways you can actually
Yeah.
pull
Yeah.
that off.
Wireframe with shaded with wireframe.
Like one way is you can actually, if you use the standard material, there's actually a wireframe choice on that, and it actually physically creates polygons in the shape of the wireframe, and you can define the thickness.
Actually, that's the tool I use, but I also, what I do is I duplicate the model, and then I push it out a little bit, and then, yeah.
So you actually, so it's not a see-through
Yeah.
model. You've
Right.
actually got.
So you get the actual, yeah, otherwise you get back, you often get
Yeah.
back facing, or you get
Yeah.
triangles
Yeah, like
when
often you
wanna render.
basically the route could be say you have a character, you take the character, instance that character, reference that character, so you have two versions, throw the wireframe standard material on the second one, and like I say, just throw a little
Right.
bit of a push.
Yep.
So it
Yeah,
pops
there's
out a
several ways to do it. You can do it
Yeah.
shader-wise as well
Mhm.
with a blend or a mix between different materials.
Mhm.
And I think, isn't there a way to do it with the contour shader as well?
Might be.
On top?
I haven't tried it with
It
that.
doesn't do the cartoon. No, that's actually Final Tune that allowed
Yeah,
you to
Final
do
Tune.
that.
Does
But
does the wireframe chat setting render interior edges?
yeah, but it has to
Is
be
there a setting
it's
for that?
phase based. So when you have a phase that goes from front to back, that's where you have a contour.
Okay.
You could use a gradient map in what is it, Square?
Mhm.
One of those options, and make a really thin
Yeah. I've seen- yeah.
linear
Do a like a
edge
yeah.
Yeah.
based on faces.
And I have
Also,
I have made the shader without duplicating the model, simply by using the composite
Right.
map, which I think what you were talking about when you do mixing,
Yep.
where in composite, shader level 1 is just your matte gray, and the second shader in composite is your wireframe standard
Yeah.
material.
Multiply or screen
and it
or whatever you
perfectly
want to
sits
do.
on top, and
Yep.
you're good to go. So yeah, there's a number of ways you can do it. Actually, I think I created one of the images for our launch website, which was a housefly that used exactly that technique. It was gray and it had a wireframe, and that was exactly the route I took.
You
And
can use the lattice modifier.
I was going to
else
say
is
there
the
is a
ladder.
geometry solution.
Yeah.
The lattice modifier.
But
so I
would
think we're
not do,
discovering
yeah.
there's a lot of different ways you can try and pull that one off.
Take a pick.
Oh, and Logan just responded, "Cave was awesome, do it again." Glad you liked it.
Check it out now so that people, if you want to get your budgets in line for travel,
Yeah.
check out Cave from last year so you know what we're talking about. Don't wait for us to announce
Yes,
this
you can
year.
you can actually go to I think it was autodeskcave.com, I want to say was the address. And you can actually see a bunch of the speakers that we had last year to give you an idea. We really blew it out last year, so we actually had John Cleese come to talk, and he wasn't there as a comedian, he was there as a creative guy. So it kind of caught people off guard where they were expecting a full comedy routine, and he was talking about his decades of experience writing creatively, acting creatively, and how the brain works when it comes to creativity. It was quite enlightening. I'm currently trying to make a microphone mesh much like a microphone on your desk. I don't want to do this via texture. So it's that little grid kind of thing.
Displacement? Displacement material?
So it's that kind of interwoven wire type of look.
I mean,
I have done that myself. What I actually did use a texture. Was you doing displacement?
Yeah, actually, and this goes to a previous question about where do you start with modeling, and knowing what you need to do with the model, right? So, like, do you really need that as a mesh? I mean, are you going to be flying the camera? Are you like doing some kind of like really cool effect where you're flying the camera like through it,
Right.
versus how far away is the camera going to be? So, you
So
know,
the question they added to it afterwards, how can I do this via splines and conform it to a shape after? So I'm assuming they're going to want to get really close if they want to do it that way.
honestly, my answer would be I would not want to do it that way.
No.
I probably would.
Oh, really? All
Well,
right.
just what I would do is I'd probably model it as a flat surface and then kind of bend it over around like that, and then
Yeah.
I guess
Well,
the
freeform.
top- yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah, you can freeform deformation.
Deformation.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, it's
not-
it all depending on the, it all
Depends on how
the
close.
use.
Like if I'm going to fly straight over that edge, then yeah, I might go into the modeling route. The way I ended up doing it was I actually did 2 layers of it, because if you actually look at microphones, there's often 2 layers of that wrap.
Yeah.
There's one that's a bolder, bigger wire, and then the one that's a smaller wire underneath. So I actually had 2 shells. Both of them I applied a wire texture to that was just gradient grayscale and displaced on both. And I shrunk one smaller than the other.
I will say, not to Joker Martini just introduced a new script. I think it's called Labyrinth, that will take any mesh geometry and take all of the edges and turn them into splines.
There's another possibility.
And then you have control. You can do by vertex order, so it's not just this. It's not just the lattice
tangled.
modifier. It's just, or if you want tangled, and I think it'll also fill a volume. So the Labyrinth script.
There we go. Another option for you,
There's an
everyone.
option there.
All right, continuing along. What importance does graphite modeling tools have in retopologizing models in a production environment?
Well, there's any number of tools. I mean, there's the conform. There's a set of tools called conform, which we showed in 2012, I think, where we had a completely triangulated game model that we wanted to retopologize as a quad. And this was before retopo and Mudbox. Like, if I were doing it today, I'd take it into Mudbox and retopo it. But using the conform, you can fit what I call a rudimentary rough shape on top of a good model underneath it, and conform it, slide it around, do it that way. Subdividing with Swift Loop, maybe you have.
Actually, I have an example to show this.
Oh, great!
Excellent.
Shut me up.
It was actually something
What a
we
dope
had we had talked about when you were in the studio the last time.
Mm-hmm.
It was where
Yes,
are we?
right. This is the one we were.
Yeah. Okay.
Who needs textures?
Yeah, there we go. Okay, so what we actually had to do, we actually had to use the freeform tool, and we had to kind of use the graphite modeling tool to kind of snap points, because a couple of things about game engines is we have to use the exact same vertex order, and we have to use pretty close to the same skinning. So as a result, here, let me just hide what we don't see, what we don't need. Wow. So kind of anatomically, what we need to do is we need to have like this labial fold be the same labial fold on every single model. We need the nostril lines, we need the crease around the eyes to be kind of the same
Exactly.
crease on every single model. So what we would do is we just kind of go into polygon modeling. Where was it? Freeform? Polydraw, just kind of using the extend tool and just kind of placing everything there exactly where we need it to be. It unfortunately requires so much precision that
You can't just use the brush.
graphite was the only thing we could possibly use.
Yeah, and I know because I think I actually released the video that had your tip and trick for this. So you can actually find it on our launch website.
Yeah, there was
YouTube.
a lot of comments on YouTube about why didn't you use the conform brush?
Yeah,
It's like,
exactly.
well, we need the precise, labial fold, wrinkle, the precise lip to go there.
It's not about
Yeah.
just having it move out to the right surface.
Yeah.
It's like, no, it has to be 3 pixels over.
Pretty much.
Okay, so we've got 6 minutes left to our session here. So I'm going to throw out, see what else we've got here that I can quickly toss in. So now, Chris, you had a tip and trick you wanted to talk about around the symmetry for concepting.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Oh, cool.
No,
So-
you're good. You stay right there.
Everyone do the microphone
just
shuffle.
Well, so speaking of Cave, let me go ahead and load this up here first. Let's see. All right, let me go. Open. I actually have to go. We've opened up enough files that I have to go dig this
Go
out
dig
of
it out.
my file history here. So,
Everyone do a little dance,
Right.
at least.
So at Cave, one of our speakers was Scott Robertson, and this was, for me personally, I really enjoyed this segment because he was basically using 3D to derive ideas. It's not just about making stuff that you use in finished products. It's about starting in the 3D tool to drive ideation. And this is not the same thing as we were talking about earlier with modeling, where you just plunk down and start modeling. It's totally different. It's using the 3D tools to come up with ideas that maybe land other places, right? So what I've done here, what he was doing at the Cave event was using a model to come up with all kinds of different types of abstract shapes. So I've kind of recreated that here. And all I'm really using is I have this, let me see, let me hide this guy. Let me go in here. And I have a human. Here we go. This guy. I started off basically in Mudbox with the default human, and I didn't even do anything. I just went to Mudbox, pulled it in, right? Because it was quick and easy to do. So I brought it in here, and then what I wanted to do is I wanted to get a bunch of abstract shapes on here. So with the using the human model as a distribution object, I used scatter, and so I created a Hedra primitive, and I used the distribution object was the human, and so I distributed all of these shapes on here. Now, if you use scatter, you know that you have some control, but you don't have explicit control in some ways. So, for example, if I come in here, I can of course control the duplicates, and I can control scale and things. I do have precise placement along edges or vertices or midpoints, but when I'm doing ideation, I kind of wanted to use the flexibility of symmetry to help me see things, because when it comes to like humans and things that are somewhat symmetrical, at least in gross proportion, I wanted to be sure I got that. So what you see here is just the basic human character with just the scatter on it, but it's not symmetrical at all. So I just threw a symmetry modifier on here, and in case you're not aware, so I have symmetry on here, and I still don't see anything. In case you're not aware of this little button right here, this is called Show End Results. So what this allows me to do is allows me to work down in the stack for Max and actually see what's happening at the top of the stack. So I've just gone in here and I've thrown the symmetry modifier on. And the cool thing about scatter is a compound object, okay? And normally when you're working with compound objects, if you'll notice your base mesh converts to that type of object, and you seemingly lose the operand underneath, but that's not actually the case. If you select the source here in the scatter compound object, you actually get access back to the original object. So I can go down in here, and I can change the shape of the primitive since it's all parametric. I'm keeping total control over the parameters of that object. So I can change any of the shapes. You don't necessarily have to use Hedra primitive. I really like it just because it gives me so many shapes. Now, I'm not doing character modeling design with this, so I don't really care about all the interpenetrations or anything like that. I've also set up a bunch of different views for me to look at. In fact, if I go back to this one, actually, I'm going to jump over to this one instead. I go over to this one, and I'm using Max's viewport styles to can kind of continue working with that ideation. So for example, I can look at it in clay, or down here I can choose one of our stylized ones like graphite and take a look at that. So I get different views within the same scene. If I come over to this viewport, you notice down here I've gone ahead, and this is kind of an advanced thing. You don't really have to do this to achieve this effect, but I've wired a rotation parameter on a slider so that when I'm in manipulate mode, I can just rotate the object from any particular view, and I can see what's going on. I can really kind of do that anywhere. Let's see, I'm grabbing right in there.
It's like
I don't know where my slider is.
the
It's hidden in there
Rorschach
somewhere, but
Yes.
it's okay. But
We're just saying it's like a Rorschach test going on.
it is. It's a
Yeah.
little bit like a Rorschach test. So
Martin, would you
let me
see-
go back to where I was working earlier. I'm in perspective mode.
Can't say out loud.
And then let me actually move our character to rotate back to the front so I get a clean background behind him. Okay, and then I'm just going to come in up here, and I'm just going to do that. Where do I go with this next? You could go any number of places. One thing that I really like here is there's a little known tool. Well, it's probably not little known, but it's probably not used. I think it's underused. If I go under Create Preview, this is in the viewport. This is the little plus sign in the viewport label.
Got 1 minute.
1 minute? All right. I'm hurrying. It's going to be worth it. If I go Create Preview, I say Capture Still Image. I can give it a label, and I'm just going to say Test, whatever. I get this image. It looks like a render, but it's basically a grab. I can copy that image to the clipboard, and a little preview of our sketchbook, the next version of sketchbook here. I can just bring it right in here and plunk it down and begin drawing and painting on it. And if I want to go in and grab our symmetry tools, I could come in here and just start ideating on some of these ideas, start roughing in shapes. If I have layers open, I would obviously reduce the transparency on that. But it's really kind of a fun, interesting way to work. And it's interesting to use Max as a conceptual tool. We were so used to using it as like a finaling tool.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of fun to begin in Max and just kind of have fun and do things like that.
And the class that Scott Robertson gave at Cave, it was really all about trying to fool your eye into seeing new things that you wouldn't come up with yourself. So this is one of his ways of like just throwing random geometry at things. But he goes, as long as you always put symmetry on, you'll start to see faces in things. You'll start
Yep.
without symmetry, you never see that stuff. But the instant there's a symmetry to it, you start to see life inside of the weirdest looking things, and that can just tweak
Yeah.
your mind to doing different things. So it is a very cool technique to use. So unfortunately, we're actually out of time. We've run through, and I've still got a bunch of questions that we never even got to. So we did well. I want to thank everyone for joining us for the session. Thank you for all the interaction we had on the chat. As we mentioned here in the chat, these will be going up over the next couple of days as recorded versions, so anyone that wants to go back and check them out, feel free, or pass them on to friends. And I just want to thank everyone for coming and hanging out with us again. It's always a little nerve-wracking realizing you're just going to ask me random questions live in front of all the world. But Well did very well. Jacques, especially, thank you for coming out. It's
Yes.
not like this is your
Awesome.
job. So really, really happy you guys could come out. So again, thank you very much, everyone. In the next half hour, we'll be starting up the Maya tips and tricks sessions. So feel free to stick around and chat while we're doing that. And otherwise, we'll see you later. Bye, everyone.
Bye.